Welcome back to Juice's Arthropods. My name is, as always, Juice, and I cannot wait to talk about our species today, which is Phidippus regius, aka the Regal jumping spider. I cannot believe it's been this long before we're actually dropping one of these. I did an expo last weekend, and thank you so much to every single person that came out there. And for the first time in a while, I started selling the Phidippus regius species. Why has it taken that long? Well, my journey to get these guys up and going has been arduous, and there's been a couple people that have been able to help me out who I'm going to tag below in the comments. And ultimately, the problem is that same thing with velvet spiders and a lot of the other species. I would see videos time and time again that would be designed to help people, and I appreciate all their work. But the problem was it wasn't designed for non-high humidity areas. So a lot of the videos I was seeing were people out of like Kentucky or Alabama or, southeastern United States. And that's perfect for the Phidippus regius, which is where they're actually from, is southeastern United States, including places like Florida. However, in the less humid places, you run into a couple issues with these guys. So I wanted to go through the standard format, the pros, the cons, all of that today. So let's get started officially, first and foremost, with what is their diet. Like any spider, their diet is pretty, it's other things. They're eating other things. Now, with the Phidippus regius, the rule of thumb is if you think it's too big for the spider, it probably isn't. They're kind of crazy. Like, these things will take down things twice their size. But you want to make sure, on average, the thing that you're giving them is less than the size of their abdomen, because I can assure you, they will try to take down a full-size hornworm. They are just the gnarliest of killers. So, blue bottle spikes, they're going to be easily dispatch any flies. Black soldier fly larvae, they eat those a lot. I give mine pretty much a lot of crickets, doobie roaches, but they're typically not going to catch them, so you're going to have to feed them by tongs. But you name it, these guys are going to take them. Mealworms, like, honestly, they're going to do solid for you no matter what. Just make sure to diversify a little bit. These guys are a little bit more sentient than a lot of the other species are, so you want to kind of give them just different kinds of food. Less so for them, but also more so for you, because if you're feeding them crickets all the time, you want to have a more diverse diet, so that way you don't have just this super fat and pudgy spider. It's going to shorten their life at the end of the day, even if it is super cute. When it goes to care, these guys are super easy. So I'm going to talk about a couple different things. Let's talk about a non-gravid female, any of the Phidippus regius, okay? The sky's the limit on the size of these cages. As long as it has no cracks in it they can escape from, these guys do really well. They're so intelligent. You can give just elaborate, beautiful terrariums for these guys. I wouldn't do much more than a 10-gallon cage, though, just because they're really not going to utilize the space. They are an arboreal species, so you want to have more up areas. They're going to climb it. They're going to do a little cool, like, jump after the prey, and they tag the landline as like they're webbing down, and it's just awesome. So the more space you give them, the cooler it's going to be for you. I don't know if it's cool for them because they're a spider and they don't care about much except for not being eaten by birds and eating other things. Now, let's say you have a gravid female. I'm going to recommend an enclosure about this big. Why? That gravid female is about to have babies, and you know what you're about to have? A whole lot of babies. And you know what the bigger terrariums have a lot of? Holes that the babies can and will escape from. So what I typically do is, if I see that they're very pregnant, I move them into something smaller like this. This is going to allow them to have their babies, and it's going to make it a lot easier for you to collect them. And I apologize for the water spots, but as you can see here, she doesn't care. She's not really going to use a lot of the space anyways, because at the end of the day, imagine how big like a 10-gallon terrarium would be for something that's the size of a quarter. It's miles away. So you can have a smaller terrarium. You don't need something expensive. You can get AMAC boxes. I have Juice's affordable housing would be perfectly fine for them for a long time, especially for like an Audax. But the Phidippus regius species, they can live their whole life in that and have no problem. But I would recommend something a little bit bigger than that, just because it's going to make a really cool terrarium, and your spider is going to essentially just go to the top 4 corners of it anyways and make their nice little hammock. So at the end of the day, it's your choice. Now let's talk about humidity. This is where things get a little interesting. So they are from southeastern United States, especially like very heavily in places like Florida. So your first instinct is, oh, these guys need to be damp all of the time. And no, it's a little bit more complicated than that. They are used to humidity. They have the capabilities of enduring high humidity, but they tend to go into places like the underbrush and places that are a little bit drier. So what I recommend is you want something that can get damp and moist, have a little bit of a spray. You want to spray them at least every 2 days, and then just don't get them wet. Now, you're going to see a lot of B-roll that's going to have the one damp. She was hiding, unfortunately, in one of the things when I was spraying the cage, so she got a little bit of wetness on her. However, you just don't want to spray them directly, because if it's too wet, they're going to die. So I would treat it essentially as like isopods, where you want to have kind of a dry side, a wet side, get a little moisture in there, let it dry up for a couple days. They're not going to die if you don't have constant water drops. They'll be totally fine. But I would say every other day at least you want to spray the cage. Now, there's one thing that's very crucial. You've seen all those pictures of like the adorable little water droplet on top of the jumping spider's head? Don't freaking do that. You'll kill them. Like, it looks cute, but it's bad, because the #1 killer of baby jumping spiders is actually water droplets. So I'm going to show you 2 examples of what people in the hobby typically have, or something like it. You have, and sorry, it's all rigged with duct tape. This is your typical mister that you'll see, very common in the reptile hobby. I'm not going to recommend that for these guys. I'm going to recommend something like this, just a typical spray bottle that's more of a fine mist. Why is this important? Because big water droplets, they can get stuck in and die, because they're freaking adorable, but their life expectancy, if they can't get out of the water, is very short. So I use a fine mister, especially if I know there's babies. I never use one of these big misters, because the water droplets are going to be too big and you run the risk of drowning them, depending on what instar they're currently at. But when it comes to humidity, like I said, spray it out, dry it. It's kind of like plants. You want it to be a little damp in there, but you don't want it to be wet, because at the end of the day, most of what they do is they hide in the pine trees and places like that, or the undergrowth shrubbery where there's a lot of dry twigs, because they're trying to get away from the wetness. So make it about 50-60%. I have about 55% humidity at all times. If it goes up to 60s, 70s, 80s, that's totally fine. But any more than that, you're going to run the risk of killing these guys. So next, let's talk about longevity. It's an arthropod, guys, and it's not a tarantula. So you know what I'm going to say. It's not long-lived. When it comes to actual life expectancy, I'm going to be safe and say 1 to 2.5 years. And the reason I'm going to say that is because your Phidippus regius might be a male, and they're not going to live that long, because males never do. Whether it's humans or it's creatures of any kind. The males typically only have one purpose when it comes to genetics, and that's to pass on and have genetic immortality, and then to die. So what that means for these guys is, if it's a male, you're looking at probably a year, year and a half maximum. Females, year and a half, 2.5 years maximum. Why I'm giving such large ranges, I don't know. I've had some that died after 2 years. I've had some that die a little bit longer. I've had some people say theirs was 3 years. I don't know what's true on that one. However, rule of thumb when it comes to most arthropods, 1 to 2 years max. So that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about that in the cons. But keep in mind, these guys are so freaking cool, you won't care. Like, they're going to live in a completely fulfilled life. You're going to enjoy them the entire time you have them. But I don't want to get too excited, because I'm going to discuss more about that in the pros. Let's talk about fecundity. Okay, so you really liked your one jumping spider. Cool. So you decided to get a male. I'm assuming it's a female you got, because they're the most beautiful ones. The males are just like black or white, and that's pretty much it. Very, very little when it comes to dimorphism of colors with the males. So you got a beautiful female, and you're like, you know what? I want to try my hand at breeding these. And so you thought, this will be cool. I'll have a couple babies. You thought wrong. So there's a couple things you need to know about this, and this is why fecundity is important if you decide to pair them. If you get these wild caught, I need to make this little asterisk. 99% of the time when you catch these out of the wild, they will be pregnant. So be prepared for babies. So keep listening if you caught this wild. If you chose to breed it, you need to be prepared for a couple different things. And I'm actually going to spend a lot of time on this right now, so you know exactly what to do. 1, Debbie, my first Phidippus regius, had 6 egg sacs. Yes, 6 of them. Every single time they were fertile. The numbers de-escalated as time went on, so it started at 150, and then 100, and then 125, and 100, and then 60, and then 25, and then whatever that math is. There was another one in there somewhere. So why I'm telling you this is that you're going to be so excited for all these babies, or not, depending on who you are. Most of them are going to die, so temper your expectations. However, there's a couple things that Shire Critters has explained to me that has helped me significantly on how to keep these guys alive. So first and foremost is 32-ounce deli cups are your best friend. The ones with the mesh netting. You see these a lot, typically with fruit fly containers. You need something because the babies are going to be about the size of a grain of salt when they're born, and you need something that can keep them all in. Otherwise, you have what happened to Juice when he first got his first one, which is they escaped into the cage, and then we got to track 125 of these down with automatic, and it was brutal, okay? Number 2, pantyhose will become your best friend. Because let's say, for instance, you have something like this. It has 1-inch holes in the top of it. Guess what? All of the babies can escape through those holes. That's where pantyhose comes in. It's going to be about $5-6, which is crazy expensive compared to the way it used to be back in the day when you could buy for $1 and an egg. That's how old I am. But you take it and you put it over whatever holes there are. Air goes through, won't affect that. Will hold in a little bit of humidity, won't really affect that. But it will trap the little babies in the pantyhose. So when you take the pantyhose off and you flip it inside out, you need to be ready to shake said pantyhose into another cup, because I promise you, these little guys are natural explorers. And when they start exploring out of that original mother's egg sac, they will continue to explore. And that means you have to be prepared for that. Another thing you need to understand. So that 32-ounce deli cup, you put all the spiders inside. And if you're a regular person, you keep the deli cup the way that deli cups typically are, with the bottom on the bottom, and then you put the lid on top. Put the lid on top with all of your spiders. Flip it upside down. Like mantids, all of these spiders have one thing in common. They will always put their little hammocks they make out of their spinneret silk. They will put them at the top of things. And I don't know why. I have no idea why. But they will do this every single time. So if you catch a lot of babies, you want to make sure that you flip whatever you're putting them in upside down. Another thing, gravity exists. So if you put something cute in there with them, that's going to, every time you flip this up to lift the lid off and put it there, it's going to fall, which means it's going to crush some of your babies. I'm mentioning all of these things to you because all of them happened to me, and I'm trying to save you from future devastation. So please, if you take nothing else away from all of this, just know, expect about 500 to 600 babies over the lifespan of a paired female, and just make sure you have deli cups that have a cloth mesh top that don't have any tiny holes. Get some pantyhose. I promise you it's like something you need to put in your field kit when you're dealing with these guys. And then always flip whatever you put them in upside down. Mist them with a fine mist every couple days, and they will be fine. When they are babies, they need to eat specifically melanogaster fruit flies or springtails. They're too small to eat the hide eyes. They'll try, but some of them will starve to death. So those are all the things you need to know right now when it comes to fecundity. If it's not abundantly clear, I don't script these. I have a general outline of about 6 bullet points, and then I just kind of talk off the cuff. If you haven't figured that out by now, I guess I'm doing it right, or I'm doing poorly. I guess we'll figure out. Let's talk about pros. Pros are very important, and I have a lot to talk about these guys. Let's talk about, first, intelligence. I love arthropods. I love all creatures on the planet, not just arthropods, but mammals, etc., etc. There's more of them, I'm sure. But when it comes to arthropods, I love every single one of them in some way. I'm not a big fan of centipedes, and even them, they're great mothers. I will have a compliment for every single one, but these particular creatures have just something special in my heart. And you know why? Because they've done something that I and no one else has ever been able to do. They have single-handedly helped people with arachnophobia. Why? Because they're so freaking cute. Look at this little face. Now look at this face. Do you see this face? All of them are adorable. Every single one of them has been, it's like they evolved cuteness to just bypass human beings' fear of these species. They're so good in the hobby. You can hold them, as you can see here. You don't have to worry about it. And if you get bit, it's like a bee sting and it sucks. But you had to really screw up to get bit by these guys because they're so curious and so intelligent. It's like they want to be held. Asterisk, they don't. But they don't mind it. And that's why this is crucial. You can have one in your hand and they can walk around and they just do not seem to care. So why I'm saying this is because the more of these kind of species that come to light, the more people stop being afraid. And that does something that I could never in a lifetime be able to do, is make you afraid of spiders less. So that is the number one pro for me, is the fact that these guys, not a single person in any of the videos I've ever posted with a jumping spider has ever said, ew, kill it with fire. Every single person who has that instinct in a normal video says, I don't like bugs, but that's cute. And that is huge when it comes to these sort of things. You cannot change people's minds by force, but they don't have to. They just evolve to be freaking adorable. So that's number one. Number two, I've already kind of mentioned it, their intellect. These guys are just natural puzzle solvers. So keep that in mind, because if there's a way to escape the cage that they're in, they're going to. Their ability to just lead the target, whatever they're doing, like you'll see them literally point with their pedipalps or forelegs towards the thing they're about to jump at, lead the target, and jump in front and catch it in midair. They do geometry or trigonometry or whatever science that is faster than you and I can possibly imagine. And that is a very rare thing, by the way. Every single person with a cat has watched their cat go to jump on something and failed miserably. And that's kind of what they evolved to do, is pounce on things. And these guys do it better. So, intellect, cuteness, 3, even though they're short-lived, every single moment with these guys will be filled with something. They're going to be super cute. They're going to impress you with how big they've taken down prey. They just have a lot of life. Like with some species, you can tell that they're just dead behind the eyes. I don't know if it's their enormous eyes and they're just hijacking some sort of mental piece in my head, but I love these creatures. These guys are so freaking cute. And I know you guys think so too, because one, you're watching this video, and two, at the expo last week, I sold 12 of these, and I didn't have enough because people were coming up to me for the entire day and a half afterward, had purchased every jumping spider at the expo, and still were coming for more. And I've already been asked 12 to 15 times of people afterwards when my next batch will be. And the answer is in about a month or so. So these guys, hugely popular. Why are they popular? Easy to take care of, smart, cute, an amazing pet. I cannot think of a single pet that is better for the amount, just for pound, this is the absolute, hands down, best species of spider you could ever have. I love spiders, but these guys are just fantastic. So let's talk about cons. The biggest one, these guys are a heartbreak waiting to happen. Their short lifespans, 1 to 2 years, and let's say 2 years on average, it's just not enough. And every single time I have one of these guys and it dies, I'm very, very sad. These guys will, no matter how heartless you are going to feel something when they die because they're so full of life. There's more life in these little spiders than most people have. And it really, really will break your heart. They're amazing pets for kids. These guys are an amazing pet for essentially anybody of all ages, okay? So it's really heartbreaking because as they die, you kind of know it's coming. They age very similar to other creatures. They get slower, they don't eat as often, it just gets bad. They're not like some species where they just abruptly die and you didn't know it was coming. They let you know it was coming, and it's sad every single time. Debbie, at the end of her life, basically hung out in her hammock and didn't do much else. She stopped eating after a little while, and eventually she just died. So that's the number one con, is if you purchase these, it's because you loved them. And they're going to die, and they're going to die very soon. Con number 2, honestly, these guys don't have any other cons. Like, I realize everything I've said, it would be kind of like, well, Juice, there's got to be another con. There's really not. They are, without a doubt, the perfect spider you could ever purchase. And that's why they're so insanely popular in the hobby. The only con is their longevity. They just don't live a long time. They're not medically significant venomed. They're not hard to care for. They don't require expensive containers. I, for obvious reasons, can't rate anything because there's other more famous YouTube stars that rate animals. But if I had to give these guys a star or a rating, they'd get a 9 out of 10. And the only point they would have taken out of it is ultimately that 1 point for the fact that they just die way too soon. The other con, If I had to have one, there's not enough people breeding them right now. They're very, very popular, and there are a lot of people breeding them, but there's 10 times more of them that are catching them in the wild. And so, please, if you take nothing else besides the last thing that I said that for out of this entire conversation, please make sure that when you're getting Phidippus regius and Regal jumping spiders, that you are getting them from people who are captive breeding them. There are so many in terms of how many there actually are, but there's 10 to 1 when it comes to wild caught. The reason this matters, you don't know how old the spider is when you get it, and they typically sell these guys when they're nearly adults. And I don't sell them that old because I know how much you're going to love to have this thing. I know how hardy they are from L3, L4, and on, and there's no reason to sell them so old because you're only going to get to enjoy them for 6 months. But the reason most of them do is because they're catching them in the wild. So, please, make sure whoever the breeder is, that they're reputable, they are captive bred, because these guys are super easy to breed. And that's another pro, but it's fine. With all those cons, if there's any takeaways from this, do you have any takeaways? She's going to jump on my face. If you want an animal that you can handle, doesn't seem to mind it, is amazing, super intelligent, the cutest thing on the absolute planet, Phidippus regius. Look how cute she is. Don't do what you're about to do. My name is Juice. Thank you so much, and we'll have a good day.